Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White, and this is Jason's Weird Reads, and this is where I like to talk about books, mostly horror books, but also fantasy and science fiction books. And today I am going to do a batch of reviews for you, and these are all horror books, or at least very dark fantasy type stories that I've read in the first quarter of of 2021. So let's just get right into it, shall we? All right, so I read a Slow Burn on Riverside by Chad Lutsky. I'm going to read the synopsis on these books because that helps me to formulate my opinion. I don't really write a review too much. I often just read the synopsis just as a reminder, and then I go from there. So the synopsis for Slow Burn is: when 18-year-old Jex moves into a new apartment, his roommate's descent into drugs paves the way for mental illness, while Jex deals with their sexually assertive landlady. But when her teenage son shows up, things take a dark turn. So I really enjoyed my time on Riverside, so to speak. One thing that Chad Lutsky is very good for is creating atmosphere and creating mood. I asked him on my podcast how he's able to reach down and in like all his Chad Lutsky books and create an emotional response out of the reader. And if you haven't seen that interview, definitely check it out. It'll be up there and down there, or one or the other. And this book, it goes into some dark territory for sure. It kind of reminded me a little bit of what it's like being at that time, or being alive, when you're like in your late teens and you're just trying to, you're hanging out with your friends at their apartment or whatever, and there's some questionable things going on that you're doing, they're doing, and everyone's drinking, and sometimes there's big parties, and sometimes just you and a couple of friends, but it seems like you're always wasted. And that's the one thing I really enjoyed about this book and the one that came before it. The previous book being The Same Deep Water as You. Now this has the same main character in it, but it's actually a prequel to The Same Deep Water as You. You don't need to read them in order though, because honestly, if you read them in order, the second book, Same Deep Water as You, doesn't even really mention much of the things that happen in this book. But honestly, if you like Chad Lutsky and you like the type of fiction he writes, you're not going to be disappointed with this story whatsoever. So definitely go pick up Slow Burn on Riverside. And it's short. It's like 110, 120 pages, and you can fly through it like that, and you're gonna enjoy yourself. Wallflower is a little bit different in the you're gonna enjoy yourself department. The synopsis for this is: after an encounter with a homeless man, a high school graduate becomes obsessed with the idea of doing heroin, challenging himself to try it just once. It's a bleak tale of addiction, delusion, and flowers. And the story is very bleak, but it hits upon a very interesting truth, I think, that happens in a lot of people who become addicted to any substance, never mind heroin. But I think there has to be a craving before the real cravings ever take hold. So a kid who watches older kids getting drunk, or a kid who knows about heroin addiction but has never seen it, but has read about it, maybe seen it in a television show, there's a curiosity. There's almost a need to try it out for yourself. I have seen, like, my own friends when I was growing up. I have seen that very thing within myself, never mind my friends. But I did have one friend who got pretty deep, not into heroin, but other drugs, and it almost destroyed his life. I think he's out of all that now, but that's neither here nor there. This story really does touch on that truth, though, that there is that sort of almost craving or want to discover what this thing is like. But it's almost like a premeditation thing, or predestination. Um, One has to wonder sometimes if we are in full control of ourselves and our lives. I'm not saying we're not, but I'm not saying, we are. But it's interesting because it seems like sometimes we're something within us, at least, is leading us to something that either we want or don't want. And this story, I think, really picks up on that. I don't think Chad Lutzke was thinking of that at all when he was writing this story, but it's what it made me think of. And I highly recommend it for its sort of dark outcome. It's very much a warning to people, don't do drugs, all that stuff, because it can destroy you. And that's very much a theme within this story of how these things that you choose to do destroy you. And often people go skipping to it, singing songs. And so this story has a fairly tragic ending, but it's one you see coming. And it's an interesting look into the world of addiction and how some people are just simply drawn to it. I think a lot of addicts are just drawn to it, whether they want to become addicts or not. In fact, there is what's that? There's this old HBO show about a jail, and I can't remember exactly what it's called. But there's this guy who he breaks the fourth wall all the time in this show, and he tells you truths that you probably don't want to hear about life. And one of them is about addiction and about how you will do that drug or drink that drink whether you want to or not. And I remember one day I was pretty drunk and I was wrapping Christmas presents, and he said that, and he was saying it to me, I swear to God. And I did not want to hear that truth. It disturbed the hell out of me. It's scary stuff. And that is exactly what Wallflower is. The next one is In the Shadows of Men by Robert Jackson Bennett. Now he's written the Foundryside fantasy book that a lot of booktubers are talking about. This is my first and so far only Robert Jackson Bennett, but I am hoping to read more of his work in the future, mostly because of this novella. It was quite the interesting read. It really goes into some dark and unexpected places. I didn't know that this author actually wrote horror, but he did in this one at least, and here is the synopsis. In the desolate flats of West Texas, two brothers purchase an old motel with the intent of renovating it and making a fortune off the population surge brought about by the fracking boom. I don't know what that is. Though each man is lured there by the promise of wealth, they are also fleeing something. A history of trauma, of failure, of family abuse, and shame. But the motel proves to have a history of its own. Once the business of a distant relative of theirs, Cordon Pugh, the brothers begin to discover signs that it might have been more than just a motel. As they live and labor in its dusty halls, fighting the crawling feeling that they are not alone here, they begin to wonder, what kind of man was Corbin Pugh? What happened in the rooms he owned? What happened in the rooms he owned so many decades ago? And is the motel changing them, warping them to become more ruthlessly ambitious and brutal? Or is this what men must become in order to survive on the edge of civilization? Yeah, so these two brothers, I thought it was inherited to them, but apparently they purchased it. I gotta sneeze. Oy. So they purchased this motel, I guess off the family, and they go there on a weekend. Actually, I think they move in and they start renovating the place. And they do come across some interesting things, some strange things, and that leads them into that distant, I believe it's an uncle of theirs, that owned the place before them. The more things they discover, the more things they begin to change within them. And there's suddenly a schism or a split between the two brothers the more they find out. And trust me, the things they find out, it's not good. let's just put it this way. They come across fairly early on a door in the floor that's under a carpet. As they're lifting, excuse me, as they're lifting the carpet, they come across this door in the floor. They don't investigate because it gives them the creeps too much. But you do find out what's in that door. And this book is, it's very dark. It's very, very dark, and highly recommended. Okay, last for this video is The Fearings, number 1 and 2. And this is by John F.D. Taff. And I've said this a few times. I'm pretty sure that this was written as just one book. And for whatever reason, they decided to release it episodically. One chapter or one part per month. I've been listening to this on my Audible account, and each episode or each audio book is about 3 hours long. I think there's one that's closer to 5 hours long. So it very much feels like one complete book, though, as you go through the parts. And parts 1 and 2, they're both very good. They start off, it starts off pretty quick as to what's going on. So let me tell you what the synopsis is. Humanity faces a series of catastrophes spawned by a worldwide event that unleashes all of mankind's greatest fears. In the American high desert, vacationers returning from a road trip are thrust into a heart-stopping flight from death as they try to avoid a cataclysmic end. In rural Missouri, the lives of a group of high school students are destroyed after their small town is devastated and they're forced to confront the end of everything they've ever known. And on the eastern seaboard, there's someone else, an enigmatic man who thrives on despair and embraces all fear. A man with his own dark and sinister goals. Someone who wants to ensure humanity goes out with the biggest bang possible. And that, I don't want to get into it too far, but the synopsis mentions that whatever is going on here, it feeds on humanity's own fears. So this is each individual. So think about your own fears. If you're afraid of spiders, or if you're afraid of drowning, whatever's happening in this world, it's going to create that situation for you. So you might be attacked by spiders or giant spiders. You might find yourself being drowned in your house, even though there's no flood. So take that for what you will. It's pretty interesting. I left at the end of book 2, and there was one hell of a cliffhanger at the end of book 2. As actually, I'm not going to say it because that could be spoilery. But I was shocked that I didn't think that this was going to happen, at least not so early on in the story. But there's, I think, only 3 more parts left after part 2. So the high school students that was mentioned in that description there in the synopsis, that I think you follow them the most throughout the first 2 books. So the one thing that really impressed me, honestly, with these characters is how realistic they felt. John F.D. Taff, he's really good at picking up and mimicking the way teenagers talk. I felt anyway. None of it felt. Sometimes you read an author who's trying to mimic teenagers and it just doesn't work. It could also be that I'm just so far out of the loop that I just don't know what I'm talking about anymore, which is very possible. Alright, so far, all these books that I've talked about in this video, I recommend. So thank you for watching. Keep being creative, and keep being safe out there. And I'll catch you guys in the next book's video.